This weekend at middleweight, we've almost reached the 2-year mark of the Jedi experience with Matthew Semelsberger in the UFC. He's 4-1 in that time. He's going to be taking on his biggest test to date in the great white Alex Morono. Matt, if I told you 2 years ago that Matthew Semelsberger would be 4-1 in the UFC, knocking on the rankings, I just ruined a cat's day, and my dog started to bark. But when we do look at this, would you believe me if I told you that?
These fighters were on very different trajectories around that time, because you're right, Alex Morono was almost seen as that guy who was knocking on the rankings, who had a lot of promise, the well-rounded, not really prospect, because he had been around for a little while before he came to the UFC, but there was a lot of promise in the career of Alex Morono. But it has felt like the tides have sort of shifted in this matchup, to where now Semelsberger is seen as sort of the fighter with more promise out of these two, which is odd, because Alex Morono has been in some very high-profile fights throughout his young UFC tenure.
But I mean, you look at it, for Semelsberger, comes in, fights Carlton Minus, complete performance, drops him early. He does win, a performance of the night bonus, and I take a little bit of a pause, because he beats Jason Witt with a jab down the middle. He beats Martin Sano, and that is a fight you're never going to see Martin Sano in the UFC again. He loses to Chaos Williams in a back-and-forth fight.
It's going to happen, though.
The weirdest part about it, though, is doesn't wrestle at all against Chaos Williams, goes strike for strike. Williams lands the bigger shots, lands more volume, and he's able to win out there. And then for Semelsberger's last time out, fights AJ Fletcher in a fight I can only talk about in the fact that UFC fans thought that AJ Fletcher won that fight overwhelmingly. You can make an argument. I mean, I can talk MMA decisions, so on and so forth. I thought Semelsberger won, but Fletcher made it competitive in that one, didn't he?
He certainly did. Again, I don't get caught up in decisions. That doesn't change what either guy does stylistically in their fights. This is my big thing with Matthew Semelsberger coming into this matchup, though. We were joking about this before we started filming. He might have one of the biggest size advantages we've ever seen outside of the heavyweight division in this matchup, and I really do think that's going to play a huge factor in this fight, because for Alex Morono, we've seen him at the welterweight division honestly not look very big. Even when he fought Cowboy Cerrone, Cowboy looked to be the bigger fighter in that matchup, and Cowboy spent the majority of his career, or at least the prime of his career, down at the lightweight division. So I'm very curious to see how Alex Morono's punching power is going to translate in this matchup, because he's going to have a really hard time hurting the much bigger Semelsberger on the feet. And how does that affect his wrestling defense? Because let's say Semelsberger does enter this fight with more of a wrestling mindset. You're right, you would think if we ever saw that side of him in the UFC, it would have been in that Chaos Williams fight, but he was more than happy to go strike for strike with a guy who I definitely wouldn't if I was in the UFC, because Chaos Williams...
Alex Morono tried to do it for 10 seconds. He got vaporized.
It was awful. Chaos Williams is terrifying when he plants and throws. But the one thing I will say about Semelsberger was that was the first fight where I didn't think he looked lost on his feet. I do think he has made a lot of improvements with his striking throughout his MMA career, because especially early on, someone like Justin Gaethje, he wrestled a lot early in his career, but he has been able to grow the part of his game, the striking part of his game, a lot, especially throughout this part of his career. But again, I cannot get away from the size advantage that I think Semelsberger is going to have on fight night.
Semelsberger has middleweight experience, light heavyweight experience. As an amateur, he's 2 inches taller, he's 3 inches longer, and he was a strong safety at Marist College. And I'll throw the picture up there, because he looks like a wild man, and he played football at 215. He has a loss at light heavyweight to William Knight as an amateur. These are crazy things, but they're true. And for Alex Morono, he came in at UFC 195, one of Matt's favorite main events, Robbie Lawler, Carlos Condit.
One of the great fights of all time.
Great fight, but if you look at it, 10-4 in the UFC with a no contest. It's crazy for Alex Morono.
Do you know what my favorite stat about UFC 195 is?
No.
The first fight on the card, the first ever UFC Fight Pass prelim, Joe Duffy versus Dustin Poirier. One of the great prelim fights of all time.
Amazing stuff. And for Alex Morono, former Legacy welterweight champ, there used to be RFA, there was Legacy, they merged, but Morono was a champ over there. And I look at it, he got vaporized by Chaos Williams. And some of those losses, maybe you don't love him. He owns his own gym, co-owns it with his wife, Gracie Baja Woodlands. The Woodlands MMA, new building, so you love to see that for Morono. For Semelsberger, comes out of Crazy 8 MMA, bit of a smaller gym in Maryland. Coach is John Delbrug, and we talked about it a lot. But for Morono, when it comes to the overall skill sets in MMA, Alex Morono, black belt in Taekwondo, black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. He really does have those. And if you want to pick a Morono fight, there's a lot of them that I could go with. The Max Griffin fight, I think that plays well in this one. Great volume, great power. You look at Morono against Mickey Gall. 30-27s, he did look really good in that fight. Morono's a more complete fighter. It's just, how is the size and the length that Semelsberger play in? Because Semelsberger has good offensive wrestling. Slowed a little bit at the end of that Minus fight, but he was able to hold on. my big knock against Semelsberger, because I've been a raw Semelsberger guy the whole time. I've been the guy. It's early on as a pro, he could get kind of stalled out and caught on his back in some of his fights. I think he's kind of fixed that. I think he can kind of scramble up and out of bad positions. Against Morono, we'll see how that one plays out, but I like this fight stylistically, and honest to goodness, I gotta be honest, I have a hard time picking this one.
I do, but I do think that there's one situation in this fight that's heavily going to favor Matthew Semelsberger, and this is why. Alex Morono is more of a volume striker. I know he has some really nice knockdowns, of course, the head kick on Max Griffin. He has the other head kick on Cowboy where he hurts him with the flurry after. But go back to the Rhys McKee fight. Rhys McKee's not the greatest fighter of all time, but Alex Morono beat him in a very one-sided fight. He was getting pretty sloppy at the end of that fight based on his volume, and I know he threw 200 punches in that fight, so it's tough for me to not to expect him to tire as that fight goes on, but I think he's going to have a very similar game plan in this matchup. He's going to have to throw a lot at Semelsberger to really get him thinking, because if Semelsberger can just go one shot for one shot with Alex Morono, he's probably going to end up knocking him out in the middle of the second round. Like, that's how much more powerful Semelsberger is, but if Morono can hit him with some volume, make him miss a little bit, get him frustrated on the feet, I do think it'll open up an avenue for Morono to win, but the problem is, I don't think Morono has the Goldilocks zone for his own striking volume down just yet. I think if he does go into this fight with a volume-heavy mindset, it's going to get him caught later on as the fight progresses, because I don't think Morono has enough overwhelming volume to go out there and just finish Semelsberger up against the cage, for instance, kind of a TKO win where the ref helps him. And I don't think, that he has the one-punch knockout power to go out there and put down Semelsberger with one shot. And I think both of those situations favor Semelsberger as this fight goes on, because let's say Morono does fight like he did in the third round of that Rhys McKee fight, where his hands are down, he is getting sloppy, he's getting hit by some shots. That's going to open up a big window for Semelsberger to land some big counters down the middle.
Yeah, Semelsberger got mopped in the first round of his fight against a short notice AJ Fletcher making his UFC debut out of Louisiana. In the second round, Semelsberger won. In the third round, Semelsberger won. And again, a lot of people like to credit the takedowns of Fletcher in the second round, and they think that he won the fight, but that's neither here nor there. We have a look at the odds. Semelsberger, the favorite, opened at par. He's minus 166 right now. The comeback on Morono at a plus 137. We have a look at the Topology votes. Surprise test there to you. I'm going to assume this one's close. I'm going to say Morono favored 60% over under.
I think I'll be the favorite, but I'll say under.
You're going to say under. It's really close. Semelsberger. So 1,057 total votes. 54% Semelsberger. 38% by decision. 54% by knockout. For the 46% that are Morono, 84% by decision. So a fair amount going with Semelsberger to win by knockout. Size, wrestling, long strikes to beat Morono. That's how the people are thinking this one's going to go.
And I agree with the people, if I'm being honest. Again, for Alex Morono, I just think where he's going to have a lot of success is also a very dangerous area for him in this matchup. Again, against some other smaller guys in the division, he can overwhelm them with his volume, but I think at a certain point it is going to get him caught with his feet planted in a bad position. So ever so slightly going to favor Matthew Semelsberger, but he could get overwhelmed by that same volume that I'm talking about. There's a world out there where he almost looks like Uriah Hall when he fought Sean Strickland, where he is on the back foot, kind of waiting for that one perfect counter, but it never comes. So I'm going to say ever so slightly Semelsberger, but I think this will be a really fun fight.
And like I said, I'm on the fence on this one. I've gone with a fair amount of underdogs already on the card. I'm going to go with Semelsberger as the favorite based on the fact that Morono has really good jiu-jitsu, but sometimes he can stall out off his back, and he is susceptible to getting taken down. We saw that in some of his previous fights. Max Griffin was able to exploit that a little bit. Ultimately, Morono won that fight, and he did look very good. So I like the volume out of Morono. I like that he actually uses Taekwondo black belt in MMA very, very well. But for me, I do like Semelsberger as the more raw fighter who has quite a bit less experience. So both of us in this fight going with Semi the Jedi to get the win. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Let us know down below in the comments section if I should go with the guy that in the back of my mind I think might win in Morono, or if I go with my brain and go with Matt Semelsberger. We're both in agreement with Semelsberger here. 13 total fights, 2 title fights up at the top. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, and as we always say, let's get into it.